sure the money's well spent.
The views and opinions expressed on this show are those of the host, guests, and callers who are responsible for their content and do not reflect the opinions of Untitled Radio or its staff.
Hillsborough County Commission. Maybe one more time, maybe the charm. I did find out that I am going to be having a primary opponent, so you're all going to be seeing my face quite a bit very early. My kickoff campaign is 2/22/22. You're invited to Mosey at 5:30. Now, in the house with me is a gentleman who is involved in Democratic Party politics in Hillsborough County. His name is John Godwin.
Hello, Angela. Thanks so much for having me on the show today. I'm really excited to be a part of
And he is tasked with finding great candidates to run for office.
Yeah, it's been a really exciting experience so far this year. Looking around, what are the races that are going to be really competitive? Where are the races that we want to focus, and who are some of the fantastic potential candidates that we have? And I'm really excited about the lineup that we have shaping up for this year.
Now, tell me your exact title again.
Yeah, I am the chairman of the candidate and campaign committee for the Hillsborough Democratic Party.
Wonderful. Now, guess what? We always start off with what's going on with you. Where did you start? Where were you born?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Orlando, Florida, so just up the road from here.
Native Floridian, okay.
Yeah, quite familiar with the headache and heartache of I-4, so that's a routine occurrence. But all my family was actually over here in Tampa, so I grew up coming over here. Tampa was always my second home, and was thrilled to eventually be able to land here.
Okay, so where did you actually go to school?
I went to Auburn University for undergrad, War Eagle, followed in my mom's footsteps on that one. And then for grad school, I went and got my master's degree from Florida State.
Oh, so you are a Florida State person.
Yeah, trying to balance out the SEC and ACC schools on that one.
Okay, and then after you left school, what did you do?
So after I left school, I got married a few days after graduating from my master's.
To a lovely lady named Catherine.
Yeah, Catherine and I married back in 2011. And then we both, kind of young kids, jumped up to D.C. without a job and tried to make it in the world. I started off interning for Senator Bill Nelson.
Okay.
And then I went and worked for a number of nonprofit organizations that work to foster democracy in authoritarian countries. So we did things like put handicap accessible ramps in polling stations in the country of Georgia so that the democracy was open to everyone. We trained women in Azerbaijan how to run for local office so that we were getting more diversity in elected offices and engaging more grassroots individuals. That sort of work in a number of either authoritarian or developing democracies, and worked in that realm for several years.
Okay, well, that is a wonderful way to make a difference.
Oh, I am incredibly proud of the work that we did, and it was also just a really great learning experience. Democracy and democratization is somewhat of a specialty of mine, as well as post-Soviet states. So I kind of specialize in Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, and Central Asia.
Now, who were you actually working for when you were doing that work?
I worked for two different organizations. One of the organization was called IFES, International Foundation for Electoral Systems, which is an organization that gets a lot of its funding from the U.S. government, from a U.S. Agency for International Development, but it also gets funding from Norway, from Canada, from a number of other democratic countries. And then after working for IFES, I went over and worked for NDI, which is the National Democratic Institute, which is actually Madeleine Albright's nonprofit.
Our former Secretary of State.
Yes, under Bill Clinton. So she started up that organization in order to also support democracy abroad.
And she grew up in a communist country, or fled.
Yes, she fled communist, authoritarian, oppressive dictatorship. And so that cause is close to her heart.
Wow, that is so exciting. I mean, we're so happy that you're working for us. And, of course, with what's going on with Putin, I mean, that work is even more necessary.
Oh, well, and what we see is Putin is kind of the center point of the pushback for democratic initiatives. We worked, the U.S. government and many democratic countries worked really hard with Ukraine to foster their democracy, to foster rule of law in Ukraine.
Which Putin doesn't like at all.
No, Putin sees it as essentially antagonistic towards Russia, which is a real indictment of the sort of country that he thinks he's ruling, that democracy and rule of law and human rights are antagonistic to his objectives.
Well, he's afraid that people will see people having the good life in Ukraine, and Russians will say, "Hey, why not us?"
I was actually reading exactly that from a phenomenal analyst recently, that Ukraine was kind of seen as the democratic version of Russia, of what Russia could be, and that was possibly one of the underlying threats that Putin saw with Ukraine's democratization. And I think it's a really interesting theory.
Well, where are you working now?
So now I work with an intelligence program. It's with the U.S. intelligence community. So I am the director of research for a small program, and we produce a number of different reports on all the conflict areas around the world.
And you have a great background for that. And we're so happy that you're helping us now in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of overlap between the two. When we're researching these foreign countries, what we're frequently looking at are what are the political situations in these countries, what are the different divisions that are occurring, what are the reforms that the leaders are making, what are the reforms that need to be made, and it's really no different from what we're experiencing here in the United States and here in Hillsborough County. We're trying to figure out how the demographics of our area work with one another and what sort of reforms are necessary and possible.
Now, let's not forget that you were a candidate.
I was a candidate. It was a harrowing experience. Back in 2019, I ran for Tampa City Council.
Okay. Who was your opponent?
So I had the task of running against Charlie Miranda.
Charlie Miranda. That guy's been around a long time.
Yeah, his first campaign was back in the early 70s. He decided to run against Betty Castor back in the day.
Really?
Betty Castor was running for county commission. She was actually the first woman elected to county commission.
Okay.
He decided to challenge that. She, thankfully, for Hillsborough County, was able to win that and go on to do phenomenal things for us. Charlie had a number of different races that he went after until he eventually went for city council, and he's kind of been a continuous presence there since.
Since the 70s, huh?
Since the 70s.
Wow.
So, he took a couple of stints off. He ran for mayor a couple of times.
Okay.
So he had a few breaks in his city council tenure for those gaps. But yeah, a handful of folks came to me and said, this is the number one area where we need change. And, looking into it, it really was. It was the opportunity to change the most regressive voice on council to somebody with vision and innovation. It didn't work out that way.
Now, what was the point spread between the two of you?
It was significant.
Okay.
So
we have some work to do if we want to.
We do.
Flip that seat.
There were three of us in the race. Joe Robinson was also in the race, and Joe Robinson is just a phenomenal activist here locally. So it was great to run with him. He and I split, and we're about in between 25 and 30%, and then Charlie broke 50%.
I see. Okay, so you split the 50.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty close. If there was one less Democrat in the race.
It could have been an interesting experience, but it gave me the opportunity to meet and interact with Joe Robinson, which I'm thankful for. I think that he's a phenomenal voice here locally.
Okay. Well, you know what? I think we're already up to talking a little bit about why I had you in, and that's for the topic of redistricting. What? Because you've been looking a lot at the maps, haven't you?
Yeah, one of the areas where we're somewhat lucky is, or where I kind of am coming in lucky, is a lot of what I do with work surrounds mapping. So as we're coming up to post-census period, the census occurs every 10 years, and
Correct.
it's a huge nationwide count of people. And then based upon that count, we redraw all of our districts. So every area that a representative represents gets redrawn in order to account for population changes. So what I started delving into is what do those population changes look like, and what are the ramifications for our local representation?
Okay. So the census was completed. When would you say?
So the census was completed in early 2021. It was delayed actually through mismanagement with the Trump administration. Unfortunately, the administration was rather antagonistic towards the census, and
Because they didn't think the numbers were going to come out in their favor.
well, and what you saw was a lot of playing games. What they tried to do was really undercount Hispanic populations. They tried to do things like put in questions about
Citizenship.
citizenship status. And if you're an undocumented immigrant and you're given an official form and asked to indicate whether you're documented or not,
Right.
are you going to actually fill out that form? I think the obvious question is
No.
no way at all are you going to fill out that form, which is really unfortunate that the administration tried to do that, because what that actually means is that that region will get less federal dollars, because federal dollars are also distributed based upon population counts.
Right.
So say you actually have 100 people in this region, but 5% of them are undocumented, you're only going to get funds for 95% of the people. So you're going to have short funding in transportation, in health, just across the board.
And
you're
that
really gonna
affects all of us.
it really does. That tactic of the Trump administration ended up actually they shot themselves in the foot on that one. So it was really pretty bad politics, because what was the result of that was that Texas and Florida actually ended up with an undercount. And what we're seeing is that those states, are still in Republican hands. So Republican states ended up having artificially lower vote count because of Trump's efforts to try and decrease participation in the census.
Now, did we end up with another seat in Florida?
We did. So we increased in Florida. So to step back, congressional seats. Of course, across the United States, and how it's determined is each state gets a share of the congressional seats in proportion to their population. We had 27 seats, and we increased to 28 seats. Projections and expectations were that we actually should have increased to 29 seats.
I see.
If it was a fair, properly run census, we would have had 29 seats.
And is that seat going to go to Orlando?
So that seat is actually still undetermined. Congress is where the congressional redistricting is where the real battle is occurring right now. So school board, county commission, state house, and state senate have all completed their redistricting efforts. But Congress has been a little bit slow because state house and state senate, which have to vote on the map, are not agreeing with one another. And then Ron DeSantis actually jumped in, which is unprecedented that a governor, jumps in Florida redistricting efforts, in congressional redistricting efforts. But he went ahead and did so. And what he actually did was try to take away one of our Voting Rights Act's VRA protected seats, a seat that was designated and federally protected as a minority access seat, as a seat built so that it could elect a black representative.
And those seats are supposed to remain untouched.
Those seats are supposed to remain untouched. It's been protected by the Supreme Court, But DeSantis went ahead and decided to meddle in this process in an effort to undo
He
one
said
of
the
those
seat
seats.
was gerrymandered.
Which it is an unusual looking seat, but when you look at the rest of the seats in Florida, there's a lot of gerrymandering that Republicans have done.
But that's okay. He's okay with that.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to have an issue with that. But yeah, he's specifically looked at this seat and is trying to reduce African American representation in the Florida delegation from 4 representatives down to 3. Whereas if representation was in proportion to Florida's population, there should actually be 5 black seats in Florida. So it already is out of proportion. We already are underrepresenting Florida's black residents, but DeSantis is seeing if he can double down on that.
You know, if black folks only knew that they have like 20% of the vote in Florida and they came out in mass, they could choose the next governor.
I mean, I think that we've seen that election cycle after election cycle. You look at Georgia. I mean, black voters in Georgia made that election
a difference.
happen.
Well, we're going to come back and talk more about some of the local seats and how the lines are drawn now.
All right. Sounds great.
Favorite old school. Today's R&B. With a smooth touch of jazz. You're listening to In Touch Radio.
Hi, this is Angela Birdsong, and I'm so proud to say I have my very first sponsor for Tampa Bay politics. His name is Sam Cohen of Attorneys First. So if you are an attorney, please give him the opportunity to quote you for errors and omissions insurance. His number is 727-799-4321. That's 727-799-4321.
By now, we're all aware of the dangers of COVID-19. Like others with existing health issues, cancer patients are at a high risk due to their compromised condition. If you are newly diagnosed with cancer, your care likely can't wait. Moffitt Cancer Center is the best place for your cancer concerns and to provide guidance to help you plan your next steps. We're here for you. Call 1-888-456-2839 or go to moffitt.org/here for you.
Who doesn't love being number one? When your team's dominating the standings, or your favorite band rocks the charts at number 1, it feels good, right? Kind of like how it feels when you have auto insurance with State Farm. Because making you feel like number 1 is an honor your local State Farm agent takes seriously. Through the good times and not so good, your State Farm agent's proud to be here to help life go right.
Call Herman White at 961-6661. That's 961-6661.
I'm your host, Angela Birdsong, talking with John Godwin. And he has been tasked with working with the candidates who are going to be running.
Yes, ma'am.
In our midterm elections. And now we're going to talk about what's going on with redistricting, starting with the school board.
Yeah, so as we were talking about prior to the commercial break, we redistricted school board, county commission, state house, and state senate, and we're waiting on congressional redistricting to be completed. But school board was actually an interesting local initiative that became quite controversial. There was quite a bit of pushback to redistricting actually occurring on school board. So,
well, everything seems to be controversial at the school board. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why redistricting was controversial, because everything right now is controversial with the school board. What we've seen is Republicans across the United States have really zoned in on our school systems as the focal point for this campaign cycle, whether it be critical race theory, whether it be being
Book
allowed
banning.
books, constant book ban conversations going on, or even don't say gay laws that we see going through Tallahassee right now. So all of that national level conversation really was mirrored by what was going on here in Hillsborough County with pushback to redistricting of the school board. So what was going on is, because of population changes, the size of the districts were enormously unequal to one another. You had one district with just an enormous population and another district with a really small population.
Which one had the most?
So District 4 had the most, which District 4 is actually our East County and South County seat. And what we saw over the past 10 years, we had kind of unrestrained growth in the unincorporated part of the county.
Who sits in that seat right now?
Melissa Snively sits in that seat. So
Okay.
she had the largest population. And if I recall correctly, Nadia Combs, who is the western side of Hillsborough County, kind of that West Tampa seat going up into Keystone, she had the smallest population, I believe. It might have been Shake Washington. But what that means is that there was unequal representation in Hillsborough County. Some folks had a stronger voice at the table than other folks just because of the population inequality in the districts. You can measure how unequal the population is by something called population variation, and what you want is just the smallest population variation as possible. You want as close to the exact same population in each seat as you can.
I see. Okay.
And what we had in Hillsborough County was twice the legal limit. So you're not allowed to have more than 10% population variation in districts like school board, and we had a 20% population variation. So if we didn't go through the redistricting effort, our Hillsborough County could have gotten sued. And based upon Supreme Court precedent, we would have lost. So it was really incumbent, it was necessary, despite the objections that were occurring, for that redistricting process to occur.
Okay, so now all the seats are as fairly drawn as possible when it comes to population.
Yeah, so all the seats now, that has been corrected. They're now fairly drawn, and a number of other cool things were actually really done with this. Most notably, District 5, which is our majority black district in Hillsborough County, represented right now by Shake Washington. The black population of that district was actually increased. One of the ongoing concerns in Hillsborough County is constantly that because of population changes, because of population movements, specifically gentrification in Tampa, that our black seats may be at risk. But what happened with the Hillsborough School Board redistricting was that was actually protected. It was shored up so that over the next decade, we'll be able to ensure that there's continued black representation on our school board.
So when you say where Shake Washington is right now, what did you do to increase it? Did you go into Riverview or anything like that?
Yeah, so
Did they?
Riverview would have been kind of a prime location to move into. What we see is that the population in Riverview is really diversifying quickly, but it wasn't possible in this case for the school board to bring the district into Riverview because these districts are just so small, because there's 5 school board districts. So what happened was that district shored up kind of its West Tampa representation. West Tampa's population has been shifting a lot, with a lot of areas having an increasing Hispanic population. So District 5, the black district, dropped those areas and gave it to the Hispanic seat, and it picked up some other areas that had increasing diversity. So it
Now, what would you call the Hispanic seat?
So Nadia Combs' seat is actually historically been the Hispanic seat and has significant Hispanic representation. About nearly 44% of the population in Nadia Combs' district is Hispanic. And if we look back, that seat prior to Nadia Combs holding it, it was held by Steve Kona, and before that it was held by Susan Valdez. So it has
I see.
a
Okay, so
legacy.
she's the first non-Hispanic person in a while.
And, what we saw was she was able to win that seat by just robust and continuous engagement with the Hispanic population. And that has continued. I think that what you see from her is a recognition that she is sitting in a Hispanic seat, and that it is incumbent upon her to be representing that
She
Hispanic
has an
population.
interesting background. I believe she's from Africa.
Yes, I forget which country she's from, but she is an immigrant and has that immigrant experience, which is something that she talks about frequently as a background that has helped her connect with a lot of her constituents, understanding that immigrant experience.
Yes. Okay. So basically, the seats that changed was 5 for the better, with more
Yeah, and
African
actually,
American representation.
one really exciting thing about 5 is District 5, that black seat on our school board didn't previously include Progress Village, which is,
Okay.
a really important neighborhood, a really important area for the black community.
Yes.
So I was really excited to see the school board was able to bring Progress Village into that seat, so that they would be able to influence the school board. and have
Okay, Progress
representation.
Village, if you're listening, you got Shake Washington now.
Yeah, so I think to me that was probably the greatest victory of school board redistricting was better reflecting the community, especially our minority populations.
Wonderful. So we got some midterms coming up.
Yes, we do have midterm elections.
And who's
coming
up? Karen Perez?
Karen Perez is up. She was actually unaffected by the redistricting, but she's actually the one who did the redistricting map. She's the one who brought it forward and got it passed. So I think that Hillsborough should
And
be.
she is countywide. That's
She
why
is
she's not
countywide.
affected. Yes.
Exactly. Yes. So nothing that happened with redistricting affected her whatsoever. But I think that Hillsborough County residents kind of owe her a debt of gratitude for really just bringing forward a phenomenal map. But she is up for election, and it appears that she's kind of the number one target
By Republicans.
by Republicans.
Because I know there's a Karen Gonzalez running.
I believe
Karen Pittman
I believe.
Gonzalez,
yeah.
right? Now, I'm just hoping they don't get the two Karens mixed up.
And I think that what we're seeing is a lot of conversations about what is going to happen. Will that opponent stay in the race or possibly run in another seat? There's actually, I believe, 2 other Republicans in that seat as well. So this has been a really high-profile race, and I think it's going to be one for folks to watch over this election cycle. I expect there to be a lot
Well,
of
I
shakeup.
am expecting that Karen Perez
Yes.
is going to do very well because she's known as an Hispanic person in Hillsborough County, and Hispanics really want to keep an Hispanic on the board.
Well, and I think it's an important point that right now on our school board we have one Hispanic representative, and that is Karen Perez. But I think that we've also seen some really great work from Karen. What we've seen is
She has a heart for the children.
she has a heart for the children, and she brings a really great, unique voice to the board in that she is a former social worker and talks
You know
a
what?
lot-
She's still a social worker.
Oh,
Did you know
that's
that?
right,
She's
that's
working
right,
for
yeah.
the Veterans Administration.
which is just phenomenal. But the voice that she brings is one that is constantly focused and cognizant of mental health issues, which I think
Which
is
how
one
would
of the
we ever have known that COVID was coming and that just exasperated
the
mental health issues.
And it's one of the leading concerns, I think, right now with our students that there
Yes.
are constant mental health concerns going on. So having that voice on school board is something that I'm excited that we have.
Okay, so let's move on to County Commission.
County Commission. So,
This might take 2 segments, but we'll start now.
County Commission, I mentioned that school board was
1 minute? Okay, so we're just going to introduce that there was an issue with redistricting.
Yeah, so as controversial as school board was, County Commission managed to also be a pretty controversial process as well, but also one that has been solved. We have new County Commission maps that I'm looking forward to telling everyone about.
Okay, so we'll be back in the next segment, and we also will be doing congressional a little later on.
Tampa Bay. This is Ainsley Doe with Florida Realty Unlimited. As a broker with 15 years experience and a veteran of the Navy, I do understand your needs. Real estate prices are up. So if you're thinking of selling your home, call me for a free market analysis. If you're planning to buy a home, please call me for a free buyer's consultation. For more information, call Ainsley Doe at 813-546-1954. Once again, the number is 813-546-1954. Or check my ad out in the In Touch You.
Hi, this is Angela Birdsong with Tampa Bay Politics. And not only can you catch us on InTouchNews.com every Wednesday at 11 a.m., we now have a website at TampaBayPoliticsPodcast.com. We are on Apple, Google, Spotify, and Stitcher, which you can log in at any time and listen to Tampa Bay Politics.
Call Ricky. Ask Ricky. You need medical or a lawyer? I got the man to do the legwork for you. We tried the other ones before, so believe we hunted down 813-248-6300. Everything gon' be okay. Call Ricky, he coming. He taking care of state of Florida. Grab a pen of sundown 184-361 Rick. That's 184-361-425. Never word from the point forward, just recline. Just ask Ricky, push your boy statewide. Just in case you missed it, I'ma tell you one more time. 184-361 Rick. Call Ricky, ask Ricky, the legal medical referral service. The doctors and lawyers in our network are trained in handling auto injury claims and giving you the best medical treatment and recovery. Dial 1-844-361 Rick. That's 1-844-361-7425. Ricky. Ask Ricky.
We're back. This is Angela Birdsong from Tampa Bay Politics. I usually have a new show every week at this time, 11 to 12, on In Touch News. Now, I'm so happy to have in the house with me, representing the Democratic Party Candidate Committee, that would be the chair, Mr. John Godwin.
Hi, thanks so much for having me today.
Now we're talking about redistricting for the county commission.
Yeah, so we kind of hinted at this prior to the commercial break that it ended up being a quite controversial endeavor that the county commission embarked on. Just like the other redistricting efforts, this one was constitutionally required. We had to redistrict our county commission seats, and what was going on was having to respond to significant changes in Hillsborough County's population over the past decade. We've had enormous growth in some areas, and
we got a lot of New Yorkers and New Jersey people coming down every day.
I mean, what we routinely hear is that Hillsborough is one of the fastest growing places in the United States. So the lines had to change rather significantly. In addition to just responding to an enormous influx of population, we also had to respond to demographic changes within Hillsborough County.
Gentrification.
Yeah, we saw a lot of gentrification going on in different parts of the county, and then other parts of the county we saw increasing diversity occur. So what that required was for some of the majority-minority districts to have their boundaries move to completely different parts of the county. And that is going to cause anxiety, understandably. So what we saw was a lot of gentrification in areas like Seminole Heights. Seminole Heights had a really quickly increasing white population and a really quickly increasing
they want it
Hispanic
back.
population.
They want Seminole Heights back. The location.
I think that we've seen that it's been a prime location with a lot of development going on. So a shift that historically has been in Hillsborough County's majority black seat, currently represented by Commissioner Gwen Myers. So
and formerly Les Miller.
So what occurred with that was kind of a changing of boundaries to take Seminole Heights out of that district, take this area that had a rapidly decreasing black population, and then add in other parts of the county where the black population was.
Because black people got to go somewhere.
Exactly, and you mentioned before that we were seeing a lot of diversity growth in places like Riverview, and so what we saw was the county commission changed that district from Seminole Heights to instead take in parts of Riverview where diversity is really increasing. And what's really actually exciting about this is that as a result, the black population in that district actually increased. It increased about 1%. It was 39% prior to redistricting, and we're pretty close to 40% right now. So just like what I mentioned with school board, where there's been a great deal of anxiety that this seat is possibly at risk, that, at some point in the future, it may not be a seat that elects a black representative, that was able to be protected. The county commission was able to put in a new map that protects that, and actually drew in areas of the county that have increasing diversity. So the black population in that district should be preserved and protected over the next 10 years.
I personally felt that there were some Republican instigators who were trying to foment dissension in the black community, saying that the maps were not fair, and there was. Can you tell us the difference between the map that Gwen Myers presented as opposed to the map that Pat Kemp presented?
Yeah. So, and I think that's kind of a great intro to this, where we had maps presented by both those commissioners, and then actually a third map presented by Commissioner Harry Cohen, and then we had 4 maps presented by county staff. The county staff maps were all pretty quickly thrown out because they didn't protect the black population in Gwen Myers' district enough. The black population was decreased. So what ended up happening was it was between Commissioner Kemp's, Cohen's, and Myers' map. And essentially, the black population in District 3, the current black population, was nearly identical under each one of the maps.
I did notice it was between 39 and 40 on each map.
Yeah. So when you're talking about margins that are less than 1%, you're kind of talking about rounding errors. So no map really necessarily stood out in that regard as far as current population. Commissioner Kemp's map did have the highest at about 39.7, depending on whose numbers you looked at and how it was calculated. Some I was seeing was 39.3, but regardless of whose numbers you used, Kemp had the highest numbers. Where it stood out more was not necessarily the current population, but what happened over the next decade. Because remember, whatever happens with the map today, that is the map that we're stuck with for 10 years.
For 10 whole years.
So
Yep.
you don't want to just look at the current population. You want to look at what will the population look like 10 years from now for that election. And are we going
Where's
to...
the migration of people going?
Exactly. Are we accomplishing good things today, and will we be accomplishing good things 10 years from now? And that's where we saw the differences be a little bit more stark. What we saw was that Commissioner Kemp's map actually had a 1% higher black population 10 years from now if population trends stay the same.
When you say trends, you would say people, black folks are moving more towards Riverview?
Exactly. So, what I went and did was measured the extent to which our black residents have moved from places like Seminole Heights to Riverview over the past 10 years. And if that trend, that rate of movement and kind of destination stays the same, that's where I did the calculations of what these maps would accomplish 10 years from now. And that's where we see that Pat Kemp's map, the map that we actually ended up with, really kind of best preserved black representation for Hillsborough County over the next 10 years.
Now, how do you feel about Gwen Myers' assertion that you really needed to include the city of Temple Terrace and the university area?
So this was actually kind of one of the main sticking points of the debate of where would Temple Terrace go and where would USF go? And I don't really understand why this was the focal point of the debate. Temple Terrace is a pretty white area.
And we are talking about the city of Temple Terrace that has its own mayor, where the golf course and country club are located.
Um, so, and Temple Terrace isn't particularly integrated with East Tampa. Now, there is a stretch of Temple Terrace, kind of the westernmost stretch, a few blocks there that have historic ties with East Tampa, with Hillsborough's Black community, but the rest of Temple Terrace is really completely disconnected. So I didn't quite understand what that debate was from a Black representation perspective. Now, if you zoom out and you instead look at it from a partisan perspective, it starts making a lot more sense. So what Temple Terrace is about 66% Democratic. So overwhelmingly Democratic city. And
so even though they're white folks, they're voting for the Dem.
Yes. And what you see is it's actually the #1 area that was a threat to Commissioner Ken Hagan. It's the area that he really doesn't do a good job at carrying. So if you take that out of Commissioner Hagan's district and you put it in Gwen Meyer's district, it protects Ken Hagan.
Now, oddly enough, Gwen Meyer's map seemed to protect Ken Hagan the most.
Yeah, so over the past 20 years in Hillsborough County, we've, of course, had Republican control over the county commission. And over those two gerrymandering or redistricting processes, we saw gerrymandering, robust gerrymandering.
So in other words, the previous 10 years, all Republicans were in charge.
Yes, and they drew the maps, and they drew the maps quite favorable for Republicans.
Just for an example, in District 1, Town and Country and Apollo Beach were in the same district.
Yeah, Apollo. I mean,
what do they have in common?
It was quite sprawling, where you saw actually even Keystone and Apollo Beach, opposite ends of the county, with very little in common with one another.
With Town and Country
district. So the gerrymandering was quite robust, but what we saw was, as much as District 2, Ken Hagan's district, was gerrymandered at the time, the map that Commissioner Myers rolled out actually made it even better for him. So it was kind of taking the Republican gerrymander and making it even more favorable to Republicans.
And for some reason, Gwen Myers does want to keep Ken Hagan on the board. They seem to have some simpatico thing going on there. Now, the way it stands, District 2 is now more favorable to a Democrat.
So through this redistricting process, what the county commission accomplished was having each district be more reflective of Hillsborough County as a whole, which is exactly what you want in a redistricting process. You don't want to disproportionately represent any one group.
Right.
So what happened was with District 2, and when we talk about District 2, what we're talking about is basically the northernmost area of Hillsborough County. Lop off the easternmost side and the westernmost side, and that's where District 2 is. It's that
So
north
some red districts were taken out, like in Thornona-Thesassa.
Yeah, but Thornona-Thesassa was taken out, but then Keystone was put in. So there was a little bit of a balance there, but overall, what happened is District 2 is now more representative of Hillsborough County as a whole. So it changed from probably about a +2 to a +4 maybe Democratic seat to being around a +6, maybe a +7 Democratic seat.